In this video, we're going to review how to conduct a talent review and succession planning process. We will cover what the talent review and succession planning is, its objectives, the talent grid, also known as the 9-box grid, how to build succession plans, development plans, and much more. Talent review and succession planning is the process in which it is assessed the organization's talent pool, successorship, opportunities and strengths, and the existing and emerging capabilities. To make sure that the company has the right people in the right roles with the right skills and capabilities to meet the current and future business needs and challenges. The objectives are to identify, retain, and develop employees with the potential to fill key business and leadership positions as they become available. Also, to build a series of feeder groups up and down the organization and entire leadership pipeline or progression. Identify high potential talent pipeline. And lastly, to get ready to have the right people in the right job at the right time. What are the potential risks of not having a talent review and succession planning process in an organization? The company may overlook high potential individuals who could drive innovation and growth, and potentially losing them to competitors. When the company doesn't identify and develop successors, this could lead to creating leadership gaps during transitions, causing disruptions and decreased company performance. Stagnation is another risk because the talent may become disengaged and demotivated. When they don't perceive opportunities for growing or advancing in their career. Another risk is that companies may allocate resources ineffectively, investing in employees who may not be best suited for key roles. Also, companies risk not being prepared for shifts in talent needs or marketplace demands, and therefore hindering competitiveness. The first step when conducting a talent review is to understand the external and internal factors impacting the business environment. In this slide, I'm listing external and internal factors. And of course, you can find some more. In this case, I just wanted to give you an example of these factors. Starting with market trends and industry shifts. We need to make sure that we understand the market trends and industry dynamics to anticipate future talent needs. Next, the technical advancements. Keep pace with both technical and technological advancements, and develop the necessary skills to leverage these technologies. Another external factor is the competitive pressures. Companies must stay ahead of the competition by identifying and developing a talent pool that can drive innovation and achieve sustainable growth. Internal factors examples are talent. Companies must understand the strengths of the workforce, the skill gaps that they may have, the weaknesses, and the future growth potential of the workforce. Also, the training and development needs. Companies must equip employees with all the necessary skills to adapt and respond to business needs and advance their careers. Very critical factor, performance management. This way, companies can identify high performance and high potential employees. And if there's some issues with performance, companies must address those performance gaps. The other example of an internal factor is culture. To improve employee retention and engagement, companies must maintain a positive work environment, where employees are going to feel valued and respected. On this page are hypothetical examples of the external and internal factors. Fierce competition for mid to high level talent in consulting and enterprise solution jobs. There's an increased demand in technological solutions and marketplace demands innovative solutions. Customers are initiating their own cost reduction initiatives. Competitors are developing service delivery solutions and strategies leveraging artificial intelligence. Here are some examples of the internal factors. Limited opportunities for career advancements, a weak bench strength at certain positions. Our talent needs to develop strategically designed solutions rather than only focusing on pricing. We need to bring into the company the artificial intelligence capability. We need to make sure that we infuse the organization with high-level technical repair skills in a constrained market for technical resources. And on the last example is develop leaders' entrepreneurial skills to identify and offer customers more creative and innovative solutions. After identifying those external and internal factors that are going to be impacting the business environment, the next question is, what are we going to do about the external and external factors? As you can see, we're talking about talent, strengths, and opportunities. And this is very important part of the talent review. We need to understand our current capabilities, which are being delivered through the talent, to identify if we're going to have some gaps in the future, or we already have some gaps and we need to address them. You address them through development opportunities and strategies, and making sure, again, that you keep a focus on what the market is doing so that the company remains competitive. So what we need to do internally, again, to remain competitive based on what the market is doing. The next step is to identify high performance employees and high potential employees. On the left side, we have the potential, which is the ability to assume increasingly broad and complex accountabilities during the next 6 to 24 months. On the bottom, we have performance, year-over-year performance, not only based on current or past year goals, but in general, how well in overall the employee performs. Once we have these two components, the potential component and the performance component, we're going to be building what we typically refer as the talent grid. And this talent grid is going to be comprised of 9 boxes based on potential and performance. In the case of high potential and high performance, we call this the exceptional talent. However, if we look at the opposite, for low performance and low potential, we're going to call or refer to individuals as underperformers. Each of these boxes, depending again on the potential and the performance, are going to have some identifiers. Like in this case, mid potential but high performance is a strong contributor. In the case of high performance but doesn't have the potential, again, to assume increasingly broad and complex accountabilities, we're going to call them trusted talent. In this case, they're going to be effective performers. It could be that the employee has very high potential, but performance is not there yet, so it's the untapped talent. And in this case, when they have mid potential but low performance, we're going to call them inconsistent performers. Most of the time, what you're going to see in organizations is that most of the employees fall in this box. Very few employees fall in this box. We're also going to create this type of identifiers, which are like coordinates. We're going to say high potential is going to go from 0, 1 to 2, and performance is going to go C, B, and A. In this case, we're going to call it the A2 because it's an exceeded performance and a very high potential. What I always like to provide, and if you have already watched the video of how to build a compensation framework, I always like to provide criteria, documented criteria, so that the process is more objective and we can avoid that subjectivity or interpretation of different leaders based on what they understand what the concept means. So in this case, to avoid that ambiguity or subjectivity, I like to provide definitions. In that other video of the compensation framework, I call it criteria. In this case, I decided to call it just the talent grid definitions. I will not review each of the definitions, but I would like to, just as an example, just go over the definition for the stretch box. In this box, we're going to be placing the names of the employees who have already mastered the current role and are ready or are anticipating a new challenge. And the next steps could be to provide them with new challenging assignments, which probably are going to provide them with new or missing skills. Retention of these employees is critical. These are future leaders of the company. The next step is to start placing the names in the different boxes based on the definitions that we saw on the previous page. These two employees are the future leaders of the organization. And again, this is a talent review process in which we need to understand the talent in the organization. And we're always going to find those low potential, low performing employees, which eventually need to exit the organization. Once we identify where the employees fall in this talent grid, is when we're going to start documenting the succession plans. Some comments here. Not all employees are going to move into this box. Some may not. There's some instances in which some employees move to the left and may move down. There's not like a real trend. Ideally, what every company would like to have is some, but not all of the employees are going to be moving into this box. Why? Because you need to make sure that you identify the future leaders in the organization. In the event that a current leader leaves the organization, that you're going to have someone to backfill that position. Once we have identified their placement in the talent grid and the performance that they have maintained in the organization, we're going to start building the succession plans. This is an overview of the succession plan for a CEO and some of the executive officers. In this example, we have identified that this employee is ready now to succeed the CEO. we identify this individual who has been placed on this box of the talent grid, who has exceeded the standards set by the organization in terms of performance, however, is not ready now to become the successor of the CEO, but is ready in 1 to 2 years. Also, very important is that you always have to identify an emergency filling. That's the reason why we have this box. And again, we're going to be creating these succession plans by documenting the position title, the current incumbent, who's ready now to be a successor, who's going to be ready in the future, who are emergency fillings, and the performance rating and the talent grid placement. On the previous page, we saw the succession plans for the C-suite. I'm going to walk you through the process of creating those succession plans using this template. Each of the leadership positions should have this succession plan documented, in which we're going to have the leadership position and the current incumbent name, who's ready to be a successor now, and the name, who's ready in the future, 1 to 2 years, ready in the future, 3+ years, and who's going to be the emergency filling in the event that something happens and we need to have someone acting as the emergency filler of the position. It's very important that it is provided a high-level summary of why the person is ready at each of the different timings. Also, that the candidate should be willing to do the role. I've seen not only once or twice, but multiple times in which the employee come back and say, I'm not interested in taking on additional responsibilities. And also the reason why we're providing this high-level summary is because it's not enough just to say, oh, because I have good interactions with the employee, just because I think so, or just because I believe the employee is ready. If it is a case of he or she could do the job, he or she has done it before, so really wouldn't be happy doing it again, or if we needed someone to keep things steady until we backfill the role, well, that person name should not be included. Very important is to document the additional development needs to reflect the skills that the employee needs to work on in order to be successful in the potential role. It is also very important that when you fill out this template and when you are presenting it, that you have to explain, or leaders have to explain, why each of the team members are in each of these boxes here and why not other team members. And as I mentioned before, I always like to provide some definitions or criteria just so that leaders don't make their own interpretation of what each of the boxes mean. Let's look at this box, the ready 1 to 2 years. This is for employees who are not currently qualified for the leadership position, but could develop the required competencies, education, work experience within a 1 to 2 year time frame. An emergency fill-in is someone, or it could even be multiple people, who will handle the position on a temporary basis until either the leader returns from leave or until the position is filled. This is an example for a chief operating officer succession plan. Again, we have the position title here, the name of a current leader, and then we're going to start filling these boxes. Ready now? And I've seen these cases not only once or twice, but multiple times. There's no one ready to be considered a successor who's going to be ready to take on the CEO responsibilities. In this case, what is documented is to consider external candidate or candidates until the successors are developed, or to place an emergency filling candidate as needed. Let's look at this box here. Chris has led multi-site businesses and participated in M&A activities. Possesses very good customer focus, results-oriented, and strong talent development skills. The areas of development include adaptability, lead under uncertainty, and becoming more influential with peers. And again, this is just a high level example. You can document as much as you want, use as many pages as you want. Maybe your HR system already has this succession planning functionality in which leaders can document as much as they need. This is again just an example of how you can create a succession plan by leader by placing potential successors in the different boxes, documenting the reason why, and the development needs to make sure that employees are solid or could be considered solid successors. In addition to the talent grid definitions, I also like to provide this criteria to identify the successors. Like in this case, apply objectivity based on the employee's interest in being your successor. Very important. I can tell you, I have come across a couple of cases, different companies in which they identify a successor, but the successor says, I'm not interested. The functional knowledge and experience of the employee, the propensity to lead, authenticity, conceptual thinking, learning agility, and some other criteria that could be applied. There's definitions that you can pull out online for example, passion for results, which is a competency, the authenticity and conceptual thinking, also another leadership skill. You can find the definitions and also provide them to the leaders. And additionally, make sure that when presenting the succession plans, whomever is presenting is going to be ready to answer questions like this one. Why a successor and not another team member? Why that person? Why this successor and not another team member? Why some team members who are in the talent grid did not make it into the succession plan? And some other questions that I list here. And again, make sure that when presenting the succession plans, they are presented in such a way that they're very well documented, because it's critical to make sure that you have identified the right people who probably continue to be developed, and again, who are going to be identified as the future leaders of the organization. Once we created the succession plans and documented the development needs, we need to make sure that we create a summary of the development plans. It doesn't mean that necessarily needs to be like in this format that I'm presenting on this page, but what is really critical and important is to document those development plans. It could be as simple as shown here, in which you only show the name, the current title of the employee, for how long the person has been with the company and in the specific position, what are the next alternatives, and the timing. Like in this case, it's a director, it could be a senior director now, or probably a vice president in 2, 3 years. And what are the development activities for the person to be ready to take on those additional responsibilities? On the previous page, we cover how to document multiple employees' development plans. On this page, we're going to cover how to create individual development plans. If you watched my performance management video, you're going to notice that I included this concept of the individual development plans in the performance management process. In my opinion, each employee in every organization should have an individual development plan, which is the roadmap for an employee's career growth and the steps needed to become or advance as a leader. The goals are to identify development opportunities related to current and future capability needs, build a bench strength, and increase employee engagement. The first step is to identify the necessary skills and knowledge that support the company's and your group's goal. Group could be interpreted as the function, the division, the sector, and align the employee's development plan with the company's and your group needs and goals. Next step is to understand each employee's current career situation, the future aspirations, and how they think they can accomplish them. Next step is to identify each employee's talents, strengths, and development opportunities. You could also include values that they need to develop. The next step is going to be the action plan, which is the individual development plan. Identify the activities, development, learning opportunities, and document them and create a plan. Why? Because then it is important to act on the plan, in which the employee and the supervisor follow up on the plan and assume ownership of the plan. As I covered before, we need to make sure that we understand what are we going to do about the external and internal factors impacting the business and its talent. And what we need to do is to create business action plans. This is an example of a business action plan, again, to make sure that the company remains competitive versus the market and to address any talent needs, again, to remain competitive. As part of this talent review process, I recommend creating these business action plans for each of the segments, divisions, depending on how your organization is structured. But each of your leaders should have, or senior leaders should have a business action plan documented. Let's look at one of the examples because you're going to see that focus areas to make sure that the business remains competitive is going to have an impact on the talent. Let's look at this example. Build a tier 2 talent pool. Develop workforce plan to accommodate company growth and redeployment of current C players. Another example is improve functional area leadership capabilities. Create individual development plans for high potentials. Provide mentorship and exposure to different functional areas and leadership styles. Another example, organization restructure plan. Realign reporting relationships and responsibilities for scalability. As you can see, again, there are focus areas, action plans, and we need to make sure that there's ownership and that there's a time frame for completion. Again, this is to address what are we going to do about the external and internal factors impacting the business and the company talent. Here are some thoughts. And again, I'm sharing this based on my professional experience in which I have implemented different talent review and succession planning processes, not only for my employers, but also for some of my clients. The one thought that I will share is always start simple, build up later. Doesn't necessarily mean that if your HRIS system doesn't have the functionality to house this information for the talent review and succession planning process, well, start simple. You can use PowerPoint to start documenting it. If you can configure the system later, fine. If you don't have a performance management process, a very robust performance management process, well, start with a simple one so that you can start tracking performance. Again, start simple and then build up later. You can make it more complex, more robust, but at least start. You need to start at some point. Next is the talent review and succession planning process is not an event. It's a continuous business process. More important, it's not an HR process. It's a business tool that is going to help achieving the company mission. And because it's not an HR process, the business leaders must master this process. HR is always there to help with any training and guidance. Again, use your HRIS system if it already has this functionality. Else, you can use PowerPoint or even Word. Leaders must be ready to present the succession, development, and business action plans to the board. It's really important that the board is communicated. Create succession plans for all leadership roles. In my opinion, supervisors, managers, directors, vice presidents, senior vice president, everyone who has people care responsibilities should have a succession plan in place. Not only the C-suite. Yes, keep this in mind. Start simple, build up later. Maybe year one, you're just going to create the C-suite succession plans. But then down the road, following years, you're going to create the rest of the leaders' succession plans. And also very important, also have a process calendar, which I'm going to show you on the next page. Simple. Again, simple, then build up later, same with the process calendar. This is an example of a very simple process calendar for the project. Include the deliverables and the target completion date. As you can see, an example is leader preparation meetings. Maybe you can call it kickoff meeting. Documents need to be completed. If it is documents or if it is in the HRIS system, completion of the corresponding sections. Talent review sessions, typically these are the meetings in which the leadership team gets together and review the different succession plans, talent reviews, and all the documents or the summary information that is included in the talent review and succession plans. What I have seen in the past, let me give you this example. They're looking at the C-suite succession plan. So the executive team, the C-suite meets, and each of the C-suite members present to the rest of the C-suite members their talent review and succession plans. This is a two-way conversation in which one of them presents and the other ones provide feedbacks and comments. Another activity, the action plans that are developed, and then most important, when it's going to be presented to the board of directors. Typically, you present C-suite and one level down to the board. You're not going to present succession plan for supervisors, for managers, for mid-level managers. Typically, it's for senior positions. As always, the rollout and communication process. Educate the leaders, train them. Leaders must master this strategy. Again, this is not an HR process, it's a business process, it's a business tool to ensure that the company remains competitive and to achieve its mission. HR responsibility, to configure the HR system or to create the PowerPoint templates if you're going to be using PowerPoint. Train leaders on this strategy, and the leader's responsibility is to own this strategy and ensure that successors act on the individual development plans, and also to present this strategy results to the board of directors. There could be some other rollout and communication activities. In this case, I'm just presenting you very simple ones, high level, that you need to keep in mind when you roll out and communicate this process. As I have mentioned in some of my other videos, I'm creating this content based on actual professional experience in which I have implemented these type of strategies for my employers or my clients. If you have questions or you need help implementing a talent review and succession planning process in your organization, feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And if you want to watch some other videos related to some other strategies, such as how to create a compensation framework for your organization, how to implement a performance management process in your organization, feel free to visit my website, and I have some videos and tutorials of how to implement different HR strategies. Bye.